I'm going to be addressing something quite difficult today, and I had to really reach inside myself to really question whether I wanted to share this in public, because I did wonder whether it was a right fit in a metaphysical conference. But today I'm going to be speaking not only about reincarnation, but I'm going to be speaking about a topic that not many of us really understand or know about, and it is human trafficking and slavery. And the reason I began to be interested in this was because some friends of mine introduced me to a group in the United States by the name of Shared Hope International. Okay. Shared Hope International's is an American organization. They're international, but they're based in America. And they have three main things that they do. They want to prevent human trafficking and slavery. They're all about rescuing and restoring the young women, and it is mainly young women, and we're talking about from the age of about 13 and up. They rescue them and they restore their lives. The next thing they do is they bring justice. So it's a very complex topic to talk about. And it's one that I became interested in when my friend said to me, you know, it's a really big issue. And I thought, really, is it? And I began to read about it, and I wondered why I didn't know more about this before. So if I tell you that the numbers of people who are being trafficked and enslaved around the world, there's a 2 and a 7 in front of this particular number. So I just want you to hold this in your mind. Have a guess, what is behind the 2 and the 7? Well, there is 1 million behind the 2 and the 7. And I'm not sure whether that surprises you, but when I said to someone, do you know how many people are being trafficked and enslaved around the world? And I just asked them to, guess. And I asked a few people to guess. And it was always, something thousand. And then I thought, surely there's a small number in the millions, because I can't imagine that there's that many people in the world who are being abused in this way. There is no decimal point between the 2 and the 7. So if you know that there's 1 million and there's a 2 and a 7, we're talking about 27 million people in the world that are being trafficked and abused and enslaved today. Now, that is according to a US government report from the 19th of June of this year. And the majority of those people, 85% of those, are women and children. Now, we're all human beings, and 100% of those matter, and every one of them are important. So I wondered, after I'd gotten over the shock of finding out how many people this affects worldwide, I tried to visualize for myself, what does 27 million people look like? And it's hard when you type into Google, 27 million people, to find an image. So I found this image, and I'm going to ask you to imagine that what you can see right there is 27,000 people. Now I want you to times that by 1,000, and then you're going to start to get a picture in your mind about the sheer volume and the sheer number of people that 27 million represents. And then I began to think, well, that's a kind of number that is so big and so vast that it must represent populations of countries. And indeed, it represents the combined population, because I thought, well, European country probably. Not one European country, but 3 European countries. So we're talking about the combined population of Switzerland, Portugal, and Belarus, all enslaved, all without freedom, and all being abused in some way. And then I took it out a little further, and I thought, it must represent one particular country. So I thought, okay. And then I found out it's Saudi Arabia. It represents the population of Saudi Arabia, an entire nation of people on the planet are invisible. And I want you to imagine what would happen if you woke up tomorrow morning and found out that the entire nation of Saudi Arabia, or 3 nations in Europe, had been taken into slavery and abuse and trafficking. And it happens every day, and it has happened for millennia, and nobody knows. How is it possible that we cannot know? So we've just heard about the economics situation on the planet in relation to our spiritual natures. And I wanted to really go back to that too, because we can't talk about slavery without talking about economics. So it's very, very difficult to estimate just how big this actually is, because it's second only to drug trafficking, and we all know that drug trafficking takes place. But it's actually second only to drug trafficking in how much profit there is to be made from this. And why not traffic? Human beings do what they do because they can, and because there is a reward for doing so. And so they'll generally take the path of least resistance. It's actually easier to traffic than it is to rob a bank. And a human life, if we can measure a human life in these terms, its potential to earn 100,000 US in the time that someone is being abused or enslaved, that's worldwide. There are many people who are valued as commodities, as being worth 100,000. Why wouldn't we enslave and traffic people? So that's what one individual is worth. And worldwide, human trafficking is thought to be worth $32 billion. And that's according to a United Nations interagency project on human trafficking. Now, that's when I started to think, well, 32 billion, again, sounds like a huge figure, and it sounds like something that might be worth the equivalent of a small country's GDP. And it is. It is the equivalent of the GDP of New Caledonia, and it is the combined equivalent of Burundi and Belize's GDPs. And I thought, isn't that interesting? 2 seemingly insignificant nations, but 2 little nations on this planet, which represent the poorest and the ones with the least amount of resources. So what does this conference have to do? What does this have to do with a conference about metaphysics? And I just wanted to remind us all that we're all one, and we are all connected. And we are irretrievably entwined. We can't talk about oneness without talking about what is happening to this amount of people in the world right now. We're also connected with the earth, not just one another, but we're all very much connected with the earth, because the earth herself is a living spirit with a consciousness of her own, which many of you will understand already. And the universe is also always seeking balance. Now, this to me means that if 27 million people in the world are being trafficked and enslaved and abused, then it means that we are all out of balance. Dolores' books speak about what happened in Atlantis. We know what happened when we began to abuse the earth in a way that was disrespectful and imbalanced. We know that when we got to a certain level of technology and we deliberately forgot that we were one, then the earth sought to redress the balance, and we know what happened in Atlantis and also at Lemuria as another example. The people of Atlantis destroyed their civilization with their warped relation to the earth and the earth's energy. They understood how it worked, and yet they abused it instead. And nothing has changed. We have a very real connection with our earth. She welcomes us, and she asks us to be comfortable and safe.